Hello, and welcome to another episode of Let's Talk About It. My name is Emmanuel. I am with the Delaware Developmental Disabilities Council. If you have not already, make sure you subscribe to our channel and ring the bell so you never miss an episode of Let's Talk About It. Today I am super excited as always, but I am even more excited today. I have a very special guest, Miss Karen Jones from NCBA. But Karen does a lot of stuff, so I'm gonna let Karen tell you all the great stuff that she does. Karen, I just want to welcome you to the show. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Emmanuel, and I'm so glad you invited me to be a part of your show today. Let me just tell you that again, I'm Karen Jones. I'm president and CEO of the National Caucus and Center on Black Aging, NCBA. We are the oldest minority aging organization in the country. We were founded 51 years ago by some nursing home, African American nursing home professionals who wanted to make sure that those of us who are involved in the aging field had a voice and were at the table on decisions that were being made in terms of aging services and programs and funding. So they got together and they formed this organization. And as I said, we're 51 years old. And I'm just extremely proud to represent a great organization. We represent about 15 different states. We do training and employment for low income seniors. We do affordable housing for seniors. We not only own and manage our own properties, but we help other nonprofits develop senior affordable housing. And we also do health and wellness programs where we try to get as much information and education out to our seniors as much as possible. We don't say we're the voice of our seniors. We really focus on educating our seniors so that they are their own voice and they can speak for themselves. But we want to make sure they have all the information they need so they can be their own advocates. The other part of what I do, we're based here in Washington, D.C., and I do a lot of educating up on the Hill and talking to members of Congress. We also weigh in on state and local issues, anything having to do improving the quality of life of African American seniors and all other communities of color.
Wow. Wow. You know what? I'm glad that you guys are around. You know, what a great honor to be the head of such organization. Not to mention, we are in. I'm just gonna throw it out there. We are in the middle of Black History Month, so
Mhm.
to know that that organization was built on the hearts and shoulders of people that wanted to ensure that people of African American seniors had a voice at the table. You said 51 years?
1 year. Yeah, we were going to have a big celebration last year for our 50th anniversary, but there was this little pandemic that came along and kind of threw everything off. So we're hoping we can celebrate in big style our 51st anniversary.
Wow. Well, celebrations are I like to say they're very untimely, which means that it doesn't matter when you celebrate, but we must celebrate those accomplishments and the great work you guys are doing. I will tell you, I took a sneak peek at your website and I was like, man, when I become a senior, I hope they're still around to continue to spread the word of I saw some financial stuff and ensuring that people of African American seniors are not being taken advantage of, which I was astonished by the numbers that you shared on your website about how frequently seniors are taken advantage of, which was astonishing to me. But I just want to say thank you for the work that you're doing and your website does not do it justice
Well,
to
we're
hear
we're actually in the process of updating our website, so I'm glad you got to see the old and you'll really appreciate the new. But let me tell you that I, just like you, we stand on the shoulders of a long history of strong people who really tried to make differences in our lives. And the reason we're able to do a lot of the things we've done today and continue to carry on the fight to change things and make things better for people is we stand on the shoulders of many great people. So Black History Month is always a great time to just acknowledge that, but we already know that Black History Month is Black History year round, and so we just make an effort to make a special effort in
exactly. I tell people all the time, the Black History Month is whenever we show up
yeah, yeah.
to to show up and be a voice, and not only be a voice but show people that things are possible. Things
Hmm.
are possible. And speaking of things being possible, as you said, we're in the middle of this little pandemic, um, to say the least. And there are there are there are vaccines that came out extremely fast, and some people have already got the vaccine, and every day you hear different information. And I'm so glad you joined me today for such a great conversation about the vaccine, but also, preferably for those of African American, because if you know history and even some myths, even some fears, but also some truth,
Yeah,
have been done to African Americans, and I'm just elated that you are here to share your knowledge and what you think and also what you know about the vaccine. So if you don't mind, I'm gonna jump right into it and see where this conversation takes us.
that's fine. That's just
Um, so speaking of the vaccine, why do you think people of color are hesitant about taking the vaccine?
well, African Americans have every right and have a documented history to be concerned about anything related to health because we have so experienced health disparities and inequity in the delivery of healthcare, which continues today. We know already all the causes of why our people, unfortunately, when a virus like this comes along, it affects us more, it impacts us more than maybe other communities. And that's because we have not had the kind of access to healthcare uh, that would prevent us from being such victims of something like this. So nobody is negating the fact that why people would be hesitant, why people would be concerned, and just want to know uh, what is this? Because it is a different kind of vaccine than the flu or pneumococcal pneumonia or shingles or what have you. And I'll discuss maybe that a little later. First, let me say I am not a physician. I am just a aging professional who has worked very closely and done partnerships with all kinds of groups. Back in March, a year now, when this all started, my organization, who partners with, again, a whole lot of different groups, got together with the Alliance for Aging Research and with Healthy Women, two organizations that are also based here in Washington, D.C. And we formed a coalition to really follow the process of the vaccine and to get as much information. And I will tell you, Emmanuel, I was one of those people who was saying, I'm not going to take this. This is kind of going too quickly for me, and what have you. And then two, I know the history. And then we talk about the Tuskegee Project, but in the African American community for centuries, we were used as the guinea pigs for a lot of different things. I mean, women who have cesarean births today need to thank African American slaves that they're able to do that. These women were subjected to that with no anesthesia, but there was people practiced on them on delivery of babies. And so we've done all kinds of, been a part of all kinds of medical experimentation. And so again, we don't negate people's distrust. So what we did is we got together and we were able to work and to get another 150 plus organizations to join in with us on this thing. And we followed both the FDA process, which of course looks at, has to approve the vaccine and its process along the way. We were always in on NIH calls to find out what was going on in terms of the research. We really followed the process to make sure that no shortcuts were taken, that it was all ethically done. We worked very hard to make sure that there were a diversity of people included in the clinical trials. We know that a lot of the medications and things that come up, they usually just kind of use white men. And sometimes those medications don't always work on other people, even women. And so we made sure there was a diversity of people that were in the clinical trials. We were very satisfied. There were lots of African Americans who did participate in the clinical trials of this vaccine. Um, and then once the vaccine was ready for approval, we watched that whole process. We were involved in it. We monitored it again to make sure all ethical standards were in place, that the gold standard to review that process was in place. And so we made sure that that was, and so by then I was beginning to feel like, okay, maybe this is something that I should take, particularly every day when I'm hearing thousands and thousands of people were not only contracting it, but that were dying, and particularly in the African American community. So I felt an obligation, particularly representing this organization, that we needed to find out as much information as possible so we could share it. So now the vaccine is approved. It has moved forward. It's being sent out into communities. So now we're fighting for equity and access to the vaccine. You would think that the communities that were impacted the most would have been the first areas you went to vaccinate. And of course, that has not been the case. And so we're really on all of these organizations and health departments and everything who are distributing the vaccines to make sure that they're going to the communities that need them the most. That's very, very important. And so that's the process that the vaccine education and equity project, that's what we called ourselves. That's the process that we've gone through over the year. And we're continuing to work to make sure that there's an equitable project. Now, I'll tell you, we are not the only ones. I am so proud of our African American medical professionals, all our African American healthcare professionals, our educational institutions, our civic and social organizations. They are all working to make sure that the African American community has all the information they need, that they feel empowered to understand why it's important that they receive this vaccine. And so that's where we are today, and we're still working on it. And I just hope we can convince people. And I was inspired when you told me you were like where I was earlier in this process. I'm not taking that thing. It's going too quickly. All those things. But when you said you made that decision that maybe this is something you should do, and it was for not only for you, but for your family. That's where I also came through that process. And I have already had my first shot. I take my second shot this week. And of course, it doesn't mean I have to stop wearing a mask and washing my hands and staying social distance, all that. But I will feel so much better and so much safer that I'm protected. Just like when I took the shingles, the pneumonia, my flu shot, I'll feel the same sort of protection moving forward.
You know, you touched on so many different things, and that's why I was so excited to have this opportunity to have a conversation with you. Um, First and foremost, I love that you stated that you are not a medical professional, and for the audience, we are not giving you medical advice. We are giving you our own experiences and our thought processes to help you through your process and whatever you're using to go through that process. So feel free to leave us a comment or a question, and we will try our best to follow up with you later. But this is not medical advice. We just wanted to share our own opinions and our thought processes. Karen, like you said, you've been following this thing. Seems like seems like since it started, which we can't believe it's been over a year already. You know, when it first happened, people were like, "Oh, it'll be over in a couple of weeks. It'll be over in a couple of months, and then we can get back to some form of normalcy." Even though our country has never been normal uh, by any means necessary. But you touched on so many different points, and one of the things I want to go back to is when you talked about the process that the vaccine has went through. But then you also talked about the history of you know where we may be feeling what we're feeling, those of the African American. Um, but you also mentioned you know the flu shot, the other ones, and I'm 37 years old, and I wasn't born when those other things were going through trials, but yet I will show up to Walgreens and
Yeah.
and get a shot
Uh-huh.
that I only know information about that somebody else has told me. So it was like this almost born trust
Mhm.
because I didn't have anything else to base it off of.
Yeah. Yeah.
But now that we have gone through this pandemic and we have watched the medical pharmacies respond
Mhm. Mhm.
to this thing and you know I don't know how I got the fear other than based on the history,
Mhm.
but then I thought to myself, being born with cerebral palsy and being told all the things I couldn't do, being told the life I wouldn't live, being told all those things for 30 some years of my life. How dare I let a virus
Mhm.
come out of nowhere and tell me how I'm going to live?
Mhm.
So you know when I shared that with you, that was a heartfelt moment because even though I felt that way, to say it out loud that I am taking back my life,
Mhm.
that I am not going to let this virus take over, even if however the virus got here, there are so many different myths, but there's only one truth to
Mhm.
how it got here. And I went through that process where I said, I don't know how we got here, but I know that I have the control to say whether I'm going to get this shot or whether I'm just going to be what they call it, a lame duck.
Yeah.
uh, you know, to go through that process. Now, let me tell you, when they first came out and it seemed like week after week, First they came out with one, and then they came out with another. I was like, where? Hold on, wait. Where did that come from? We've been, and I hear people say, and I said it too. I even posted on my personal social media. I was like, we've been fighting cancer forever, and now all of a sudden, this pandemic comes in less than a year. We have a vaccine, but I think the information you shared about the process that it has went through, for me, this is the first time I remember or that I got heard that African Americans were part of that process
Yes.
through trials and through those steps that it went through. Now the next step of that is to get people with disabilities in those trials because that has been a challenge with
Mhm.
this one. But I think based on what I know, at
Mhm.
least from a culture background, at least that gives me enough hope to say, okay, this is something that I can take. This is something that I can partake in. And I've been known as a fighter since I was born. So I've refused to go one round with this coronavirus. And I say one round because it's been over a year. I refuse to go one round and throw in the towel simply because I'm afraid, based on our history or where we come from. You mentioned other organizations joining that force with you guys and really making a point. So, Karen, we both did that process where I was like, girl, I'm not, look, when that person came out, I said, no way, I don't care. They gonna have to hold me down. And they gonna have to make it mandatory. That's what they gonna have to do in order for me to get it. When we went through this process, of figuring out that it was more, that it's bigger than me.
It is.
The cause that we are making,
Mhm.
the level of protection that we are giving ourselves, but also giving generations and generations and generations to come. We have, I feel though we have an obligation
Mhm.
to do what we can to protect ourselves. Yes, it's not like Sloman's shield, good bubble of protection, but it's a layer, and I think to be part of a layer and not an afterthought because our culture has always been an afterthought on a lot of stuff. But to be part of this layer of protection, you know, what would you say to somebody if you had 2 minutes to encourage somebody to help them understand? Again, I understand you're not a medical professional, but giving your knowledge and giving what you know and that process that you went through, what would you say to somebody if they say, Karen, you got 2 minutes, 2 minutes to make one more plea or one more understanding for me, what would you say?
Well, first, I would say I always tell people anytime you have some concerns, everyone should consult with their own personal physician and let their physician tell them what they believe is correct. I can assure you, just about every one of them will say, get that vaccine. I, I put money on it. The second thing I would tell you is that never before, and I'm, of course, much older than you. I lived through when we were going through the polio incident, the last of smallpox, all of those vaccines. And I never knew, I guess because I was young and I wasn't studying it then, but I don't remember there being the participation, the interest, or even in part of the process of so many African American medical and scientific people. I mean, the Moderna one vaccine, a black female who named Kizzy, how's that? was one of the major persons involved with developing that vaccine.
Wow.
And that goes on with all the other vaccines. There were African American scientists involved, and ethicists, and people involved again in the entire process. This is the one thing. I mean, I'm like you. I go get that flu shot. I go get my I just comfortably and didn't question at all if it had been tested on anybody. I just took it because I knew that I didn't ever want to get shingles, and I don't want to get pneumonia, and I don't want to get the flu. I just do it. On this one, I know that the hesitancy was because it happened so rapidly. And you had the different pharmaceutical companies getting involved in it because it's a pandemic. It's not only just here in the United States, but it's around the world. And they saw how it was affecting so much of the population. And of course, not to mention the impact it's had on the economy. And so these pharmaceutical companies knew that it was important to, first of all, jump on this. I'm sure they pull people from off of other research that they were doing to get involved in this, and everybody give their best knowledge on how to develop it. And then, they knew they had to get it done. So maybe it looked like it was a quick process only because we were trying to address an issue. Now, they'll be the first to tell you that it's not a cure, that it is only and it's done differently, with smallpox and with chickenpox and all those. You actually take the disease and put it into the vaccine, and then they fight each other when they're on the inside. This vaccine is differently. It's taken more from not a DNA, but they call it GMA, which is a whole genetic kind of thing. And what it does basically, just in layman's term for people like me and you, is it basically boosts your immune system to fight off the virus. Okay, which is different from some of these others that actually is the virus fighting the virus. Okay, so that's why it's different. And that might have been contributed to why it didn't take as long to work on. But it's trusted voices from the African American community who I have listened to and learned a lot from the research and the data that they have collected, the information and the studies that they've done. Again, the medical professionals, all the healthcare professionals, scientists that were African American who were involved in this. I just have a different feeling about this one, and a much more of a confidence on why it's important our community take advantage of it. And again, we're still going to have to wash hands. We're still going to have to wear masks and everything. But if you get exposed to it and you've had the vaccine, you should not get as sick as you would if you had not had it. And so that's what we're going for. We just don't want people to get so sick that they have to be hospitalized. And I tell people, they say, well, I don't like shots. Well, I don't like ventilators. So I would, I mean, that you got to weigh a lot of that. You've seen all the mimes or whatever they call them, where people are growing hair out of their eyes.
Yeah.
I mean, everybody, come on. You don't do that with your flu shot. And then if you're somebody that just doesn't get vaccinated at all, you're just putting yourself at risk for something that we've not had to deal with in this lifetime. And so I just, again, because of the confidence that I have in the people that have been involved in this process, who have been trusted voices and trusted persons in developing working on other kinds of diseases, other kind of viruses, but who were involved in this, I just feel much more comfortable in taking it. And I'm very proud I get to take my second dose this week.
Wow, I can't wait to follow up with you after that. And before we leave the virtual studio today, you wouldn't think a year or two ago, we would be saying anything virtual. I'm always a silver lining kind of guy. That has been my whole life. I believe there are silver linings in everything.
Yes.
Some you may have to jump to look for, you may have to crawl to look for, you may got to lift up some stuff or look under a box. But I can 99.999 say that there's a silver lining somewhere. So, speaking of silver linings, as a person of strong knowledge and knowing the history, have you seen any benefits to this pandemic? And I know that may be what we call a oxymoron.
No.
Uh, um, but have you seen
Mhm.
benefits of
Yeah.
this, especially in the African American
Oh, yeah.
culture?
You know what the benefits have been? That for organizations like mine for the last 51 years and many other organizations who have tried to get the medical profession and for our government and everybody to recognize the health inequities and disparities that are present, that have continued. The one thing this pandemic has done, it has put a bright light on that particular issue. And so we know that we have now the evidence. We've been telling you that when we lack education, when we lack good housing, when we don't have access to good food, when we don't have access to health care, all of those things, then you create the health inequity. And when you have a health inequity, a pandemic like this can come through and wipe out a community. So it has certainly, if you're going to have a benefit on something as horrific as this pandemic, that has been the one thing that has been a benefit. And I think based on what's happened, you're going to see some changes. I've done more webinars with health professionals talking about implicit and explicit bias, things that they come to when they see somebody who's of color, and they automatically assume, oh, these are things that I learned when I was a kid about these people and blah blah blah, or they don't take our pain seriously, or they automatically think that when we come in and we're sick and like that, we're on drugs, or those kind of things. Now they understand that there are so many other things that they have to work on as medical professionals to address us as what they take in their Hippocratic oath or what have you as human beings. So I'm hoping that we'll see more of a humanitarian view to access to health care, that we stop looking at who can afford health care and who can't. And when we recognize that a healthy society is a productive society, you'll get more out of people if they're not sick. They'll be able to work longer, they'll be able to contribute more. I think that's the benefit that hopefully will come out of this pandemic. So yeah, we've seen some good things happen as a result.
Wow, wow, what a timely moment. I keep bringing up African American History Month because we're in the middle of it. We're in the middle of it. But as we said, we should celebrate all year long. But I can't help but in the month of February, people of African American are getting the vaccine. I've been seeing commercials and I've been seeing little posters and things as you ride down the street. I've been, when I do get in the car and that's about as far as I will go in the car. I'll go through a drive through or something like that. But I'm not a. But now when I get the vaccine, of course, it's not you know a pass for following those rules. But I think you're right. I think looking at that and understanding that has also gave me hope for a culture that we will now that the medical professionals and the environmental people will start looking at drinking water, food deliveries, um, you know, uh, free lunch programs for the kids, which now we have been home for over a year. What are we doing for that population that may not have, someone home to cook for them. And I think you bring up several great points that when you have a healthy society, that's when you create a productive society. And especially for all people, but especially those with disabilities. I am one, and I can speak from personal experience. Every year, if not every other year, I usually end up with pneumonia,
Mm.
and I'm talking about double pneumonia. I'm talking about one step away from a ventilator and all of those challenges there. But this has been the healthiest year for me.
Mhm.
Um,
Because you
and
haven't been anywhere.
exactly, exactly, and I say that as a little bit of humor. But even though I haven't been anywhere, this has been I've always been productive in my job and good at what I do. But this year, I've been able to show. I've been able to show that I can do it remotely. That I can not only do it remote, but I can do it well. I can do it well, and I can thrive, and I've been able to accumulate some sick time. Every year, I got to use every sick time I get because I know old man winter coming and ain't gonna wipe it out. But but now I'm able to accumulate
Mhm.
that time. I have never been. Yes, I struggle with being bored. As you can tell, I'm a very social person.
We all are.
Um,
Yeah.
I love to be around people.
Mhm.
I struggle with that, but from a career point and a society member point of view, I have been the happiest because I think we've been able to restore.
Mhm.
We've been able to restore hope, and
Mhm.
as long as we can stand on hope, then we can continue to move forward. So I
Absolutely.
want to take another 30 seconds to say thank you again for giving your time and your knowledge. Like I said, I read your bio. I was just, oh my God, I gotta talk to her. And then I met you on the webinar that we did last week.
Mhm.
Um, and the things that you are doing for your organization, your society, your family, and even some of the things that you used to do. A little bit of politician, and we won't go into all that, even though I am.
Looks like I couldn't keep a job. Yeah. So.
Uh, no, I saw that, and I told you my ambitions for running for office one day, and within the next 2 to 4 years, and I read that, and that just restored hope even more because I knew that it was possible, and
Absolutely.
I thank you for being that bright light, and like you said, this pandemic has put a light on everything, but I think one of the things that it put on, and I'll leave with this, is the fact that people with disabilities have always knew how to adapt. However, we needed the rest of the world to catch up with us.
Mhm.
For 37 years of my life, now the rest of society had to go through some of the same things, social isolation,
Mhm.
not getting what they needed from healthcare providers, and you mentioned about how healthcare providers look at us. Yeah, it's a triple whammy when you go in there. You're African American, you got a disability, and you're a male. That's some serious cards right there. That's some serious cards. Um, but because of stories like this and people like you willing, I reached out to you within 3 or 4 emails. We had a date set. So I sent you was like, okay, where I need to be, when I need to be there. So again, thank you for the opportunity to pick your brain, and when this pandemic is over, I'm in DC quite often, so I may have to swing by. we will both be vaccinated, so that'll be a good thing. Got to throw that out there.
Yep.
Um, but I thank you for your time, and I wish you well in your organization.
Thank you.
And I'll be following up after you get your second dose and see how you're feeling, and maybe we can. The council has a podcast get ready to launch.
Hmm.
Probably beginning of next month, the end of next month. So I'll probably be following up with you to do an interview
Okay.
with that. I can use the audio from that and follow up with you about how you're feeling, how it made you feel, just to give more people knowledge of this vaccine.
Sure.
So thank you for your time. Any more last words for the audience?
No, I just number one, congratulate you on this way of reaching people. The more we talk about it, the more we share, the more they hear from trusted voices. As I keep saying, I think the more we change minds, and I hope that everyone listening will take advantage of the opportunity to get this vaccination so that we can get our lives back going. But most importantly, that African Americans won't be affected and impacted so greatly on the numbers of people who have died and who will suffer as a result of getting this virus. It's just kind of up to us to do it for ourselves, but also the people we love. So,
Absolutely. Well, this has been another episode of Let's Talk About. Again, my name is Emmanuel. I am with the Delaware Developmental Disabilities Council, and I got the pleasure of talking to Miss Karen, the president and CEO of NCBA. Did I say that right?
you said it right. National Caucus and Center
Oh,
of Black Aging, NCBA.
that's how you know you got it going on when you got a really long title that nobody else can pronounce it. Uh, so don't forget to ring the bell and subscribe to our channel. Leave us a comment, give us a thumbs up. And if you got a question or a comment, I will be sure to respond or send it on to Karen and have her respond. And then I will post her response on the channel. Until next time, be safe and please wash your hands. Bye, everybody.